Hmm. Okay, hello everyone. I'm not sure. Okay, let me see. All right, so maybe we can just start and see a couple of others joining. And I know connection issues in Yaoundé and Douala, but I think it will be perfect. And we will be recording this webinar, this call, and so that we can get an overview after. So, all right, so welcome everyone. I think I say we'll start like in 3 minutes. Let me just try to share again. Someone is saying the link is not working.
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple of minutes. I think in 2 minutes we'll start. So Richard, I see you, sir.
Yes, Harrison, great to see you again.
It's really great. It's great. It's great. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. All right. So I'm happy to have you. And I, I'm not sure. I think connectivity is a serious issue in Cameroon. And
Trust me.
I'm not sure if Richard also has such issues, but it's a serious
How is the weather? Could it be a weather issue?
no, I don't think it could be a weather issue. I'm not sure
Mm,
because I think now in Douala it's kind of sunny. It's not, but the weather is just normal. It's not like there's heavy rains.
okay.
Okay, so all right, 1 minute and we start. Hello, Mr. Franklin. Hope you're doing well. It's like you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm doing extremely very well. How
Okay.
about you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. I just got stuck in Abuja. I had a flight yesterday and I missed the flight, so I had to stay back.
Sorry about that.
It's fine. Maybe they say every disappointment is a blessing. So
Every disappointment is a blessing. There's just one or two things attached to it.
yeah. I hope when Cameroon wins the match today, these Nigerians will not hold
Well, of course, Cameroon is going to win the match.
I hope so because I really hope so.
We have a very big problem when it comes to the network. Cameroon has a big challenge when it comes to internet connection.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's affecting a lot. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of small businesses that depend on internet. It's really challenging.
Yeah, just hope that maybe in a few years to come, we are going to have other service provider which are going to come up with better products because the MTN, the Orange are just something else.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I also think satellite internet is coming, and I know a couple of people with satellite internet in Baminda, and it's kind of that's what really works better. But it's expensive, of course. It's expensive because they are still using it from Nigeria. So Cameroon hasn't yet gotten that
Just keep our fingers crossed, hoping something better is going to come up. Yeah, the nearest future to come.
Okay, so we can just go ahead and start. And I see a couple of people joining. So, all right, welcome everyone to this webinar series, what we title Youth Transport Dialogue Series. My name is Harrison, and I'm from the International Student Environmental Coalition, Cameroon. And we are happy to have you all here. I also see Engineer Tokam that just joined. And so today it will be, I initially we thought of it to be 2 hours, 15 minutes, but I think it will be really be long. We try to reduce that time so that people can get and prepare for the match. So, okay. So this webinar series is part of what we, it's part of a project we started in Cameroon known as Clean Air Initiative. And it's all about trying to address some of the pressing issues around the transportation sector, air pollution, and climate change, particularly in Cameroon. But there are other people who joined, like Richard joined from Uganda and Mr. Kabir who also joined out of Cameroon. So, but we wanted to center this discussion around Cameroon, but climate change is global, but the impacts are felt locally. So we are localizing the context to Cameroon, but it's the same thing in Uganda. It's the same thing anywhere. So I really hope that this will be an opportunity for us to learn from our panelists and share some thoughts. It will be a series of conversations, and we hope that with this we can get to some real groundwork that can foster sustainability in our communities. So in this first webinar, we actually titled it Sustainable Mobility and Climate Action in Cameroon. What are the perspectives, challenges, opportunities, and realities? You know, me, I'm an environmental engineer, so I've been in the climate space for a while. I realized that a lot of people don't talk about some of the pressing issues that I see globally, like air pollution. I see a lot of groups working on climate change, but some of them tend to focus on other issues. But sometimes air pollution is left away. And when you look at air pollution, the sectors that contribute to air pollution, the transportation sector is also a major part of it. So this project is part of a very broad initiative that we hope that it will go across Cameroon and start some of these conversations that groups will start taking air pollution seriously. And we hope to collaborate with everyone here to see how we can ensure safe air in our communities and also foster sustainable mobility. So we have expert here who is really into sustainable transportation, mobility, and climate action. He will share some thoughts with us, and another person will share thoughts on air pollution and the health impacts. So this series of conversation, I really hope will be interesting for us. So, like I said, on this flyer, I'm just there with Engineer Tokam, who is joining from Nairobi in Kenya. And he'll get to talk more, maybe in a couple of minutes, he'll talk more about some of the transportation issues. He's a very great engineer. And let me just run down our agenda for today. So it'll be like I think 1 hour, 45 minutes, maximum should be 2 hours, will be done with this webinar since it's an introductory conversation. And this agenda is just something that we can follow. I look at a word of welcome and opening remarks that I've just talked about. So I welcome you all. I welcome you all to this webinar. And I also wanted to do a quick check-in, like where are you joining this webinar from? Maybe if you can turn on your video, you say where you're joining the webinar from, it will really be interesting. I will start with myself and then I'll pass it on to maybe to Franklin and then. So my name is Harrison. I'm joining this webinar from Abuja in Nigeria. But I'm a Cameroonian. I stay and work in Cameroon. And I'm also in a lot of places. So I'll pass it on to Engineer Tokam, who might just tell us where he's joining the call from. Just a city is enough. We cannot get you. I think probably there's a sound issue with. All right. Why Engineer Tokan figures that out? Franklin, can you go next? Just maybe the city you're joining the call from.
I'm joining from Boya.
Okay, from Boya in Cameroon. All right.
Yeah.
So Richard, you want to go next?
Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, my dear friend Harrison. It's a pleasure to be in this yeah.
Oh, Richard, you're breaking. We cannot hear you.
Was meant to be from viewers and listeners in the
Richard, I'm not sure we could not hear you. I'm not if I don't think it's my connection. All right. Engineer Tokam, can you go next? Maybe the city we are joining from so that these people. Okay. It's still not good. No, no.
Yes, Harrison, how about now? Am I audible? Ah.
You can hear me
Yeah, we can hear you now.
now? No, I can't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, good.
All the way.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you now.
Good, good, good. So, sorry, yeah. Sometimes actually it happens. So, yes, I'm Kabul Tokam. I'm a transport engineer based in Nairobi, but I'm from Cameroon. So I'm from the same country as Harrison. So Harrison also is a very great engineer. So we actually attended the same school in Cameroon. So it's nice to meet you all. I know there are some people coming from Nigeria, Uganda. So I'm actually glad to meet you all. So looking forward actually for like great exchange for the next 2 hours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, engineer. Anybody want to go next? If you cannot talk, maybe you can just type it in the chat, the city you're joining from. So it's no big deal because I know sometimes the connection is really complicated. All right, so okay. I think anyone who wants to check in, let me see.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Okay, since maybe let's just
to everyone. Ndam from here and forward to see everybody here. And thank you. I'll be hanging back the floor, waiting to see the result. Let's see the presentation from the panelists. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Adamu. Okay, Adamu is joining from Yaoundé, I believe. So any person that wants to check in, you can just put in the chat the city where you're joining from. So like in our agenda, I would try to give a background, a little background about ISEC and also this Clean Air Initiative Cameroon project and this webinar series. And from there, we'll just go to the first speaker. The first speaker is Engineer Tokam. He will talk about sustainable mobility and climate action in Cameroon. What are some of the perspective, challenges, and opportunities? So Engineer Tokam works a lot on the transport projects in African cities. So he'll give like a perspective and share with us some of those realities. And from there, we can have question and answers for him. And then the second presenter, like we said, the transportation sector contributes to air pollution. It's one of the major sectors that leads to air pollution. So we wanted to look at one of the realities that are linked to the transportation sector, which is air pollution. So the next speaker will talk about the impact of air pollution on health and air quality in Cameroon, which is quite important. I saw some of the questions that the registered participants were asked. Hopefully through this presentation, it will answer some of those questions and then open up for more discussions. And then again, after that, we'll have like question and answer, and then there'll be an open panel and discussion, because there are also some other panelists that might not necessarily give a direct presentation, but they'll share their perspective about the issues that we are discussing. And then we'll have like a closing remarks. Like I said initially, this will be a series of webinars. Personally, for example, I'm working on air quality modeling and forecasting. So I might not necessarily talk about that, but in a subsequent webinar, I'll definitely talk more about what I'm doing as research. So I think it's also very important. And to just begin with, I want to talk a little about ISEC. This Clean Air Initiative Cameroon, it's a project of ISEC. ISEC is the International Student Environmental Coalition. And ISEC is an organization that was founded in 2016. And presently we are in 32 countries globally. So there are countries in the global north, in the US, some Europe, and then in the global south as well. So it's quite active in Africa, I think over in 8 African countries, which is, the covering is great. So what ISEC does is that ISEC provides resources and organizational power to help young people around the world to be able to engage in grassroots movement for climate action, environmentalism, and climate justice. So that's basically the idea of ISEC, giving young people these resources, this organizational support, what they need to start some of these initiatives in their country. I started ISEC in Cameroon sometime back in 2016, 2017, and it's grown to be a massive thing in the country, and I'm happy to see how the impact is in Africa. I am also the executive director of ISEC, which means I lead this organization. I try to support young people in these countries. I give them mentorship and a lot of just to be there. There are people who want to take action in their communities, but they don't know where to start from. So ISEC is there, and it's important that sometimes this disparity between climate action in the global north and the global south, we can reduce it through this support, this organizational power, and all this. So, like I said, we're in 32 countries, and programs in each country, they vary. The impact has been massive over the past 8 years. There have been more than 100 programs and campaigns in all these countries, and we have been reaching over 250,000 young people. So this is something that ISEC as a whole has been doing. And if you look at how we have evolved, it actually started in the US, but now it's focusing on the global south. So giving that support to young people, to students in the global south, that they can engage in climate action in their communities. So this is one of the projects for ISEC in Cameroon. And like I was just talking, ISEC is in Cameroon. It started in 2016, 2017 somehow. Initially, ISEC had just 10 members focused in one region of Cameroon. But now ISEC is in 3 regions of Cameroon with over 50 members and many more volunteers. ISEC is in Yaoundé, Douala, Bamenda, and now Cham. So we're trying to look at how people can get this support across Cameroon and in other parts of the world. Why I work to support young people in 32 countries, I'm also much focused in Cameroon, and because I'm a Cameroonian, of course. So, but this is what ISEC is doing. And I just wanted to share more about the team, some of these activities that ISEC does, which is very important. This is one of the projects. Aside from being a young person who is passionate about climate action, seeing change in our community, I'm also an engineer. So sometimes the project we do at ISEC Cameroon, I try to use some of my engineering background, some of the knowledge I have to address some of the issues I see around me. That's the reason why we started the Clean Air Initiative Cameroon. And, and it's been impactful so far. And the Clean Air Initiative in Cameroon started because we saw the need for addressing air pollution. I did a master's thesis in Cameroon on air pollution control in the cement factory, because the cement factory also contributes a lot to air pollution. But what I realized why I was doing that research in Douala was that air quality in Cameroon is so bad, it's so terrible. It's so terrible. And people are not aware about some of these issues. There are a lot of deaths that are attributed, that are linked to air pollution, but people don't talk about it. So we started the Clean Air Initiative to raise awareness around air pollution, try to look at the sectors that contribute to air pollution and advocate for policy change, advocate for action. People can take action when they are aware, when they know what is happening. But when people don't know what is happening, it's so difficult. And what has happened with this Clean Air Initiative, let me just go back to this, is that this Clean Air Initiative, it started in 2022, and we did some workshops. We encouraged groups to start working on air pollution. We raised awareness. And I saw that long term, it's not really sustainable. What can we do? I had this idea that, because according to statistics by UNESCO, only 7 countries out of the 54 African countries in Cameroon have like real-time air quality monitoring. Cameroon does not have any real-time air quality monitoring, so it's kind of hard. So we've expanded this Clean Air Initiative to have a lot of components. So we started with the transportation sector, wanted to focus on the transportation sector, but now we want to go to more practical. So we are adding a citizen science component into it. So in the long term, what we intend to do is try to monitor air quality in a couple of cities. We will start with Douala, where air pollution is really high there. And we are working with a couple of organizations that will be able to provide some of this air quality monitoring instrument. And then we're also planning on building like a mobile application that will give people real-time information about air quality in Douala. So this is a bigger aspect of it. And we are also working on initiatives around the transportation sector. What can people do to promote active mobility, sustainable mobility as an individual, as a group? What can we all do? So that is something that we are looking at. And I'm sure Engineer Tokam will say a lot about sustainable mobility. And I'm also doing a research work on predictive analytics, focusing on air quality. So I'm working on 3 pollutants, particulate matter, and then sulfur dioxide and ozone. So these are some of the things that my research work will actually help in this Clean Air Initiative Cameroon. So in a broader sense, we started this Clean Air Initiative Cameroon again this year. We wanted to start this series of webinars, this series of conversations, where we'll throw light on some of these issues that we are facing in Cameroon. And this first part, we wanted to really start on something that is practical, because when I look at the transportation sector, we have a lot of issues in Cameroon, a lot of problems, a lot of issues. And it's by starting these conversations that group can really get to work on it, and we can even ask our policymakers to do some things that are really sensible. So in a nutshell, basically, this is what this Clean Air Initiative is all about. Like I said, after this series of workshops, there will be a physical gathering in Yaoundé. There will be a physical gathering in Yaoundé where we'll really come together and with the stakeholders that are involved in the transportation sector, climate action, and other aspects of the environment, we need to discuss how we can address air pollution. What are the strategies that we need? What are some of the tactics that we can use to advocate for clean air in our cities, advocate for sustainable transportation in our cities? So these are some of the aspects that will be coming up, but we start with this series of webinars, this series of conversation, and hopefully people like Engineer Tokam and Franklin that can share their expertise. It's very important for us. So I saw a lot of questions that came up during for the registration. I hope that through the presentation, some of those questions will be answered. And also, if there's any other question, our experts are here to talk about, to share their experiences and their perspective. So in a nutshell, that is what this webinar is all about. And so to go, I think we will just go next to the first speaker, Engineer Tokam. And Engineer Tokam is really an amazing engineer. We went to the same school together in Yaoundé. I did environmental engineering and he studied civil engineering. And he's currently working as a transport researcher with GIZ. So he has an amazing profile, but I won't want to read that to confuse a lot of people here. So I'll just pass it on to Engineer Tokam. He'll be talking about sustainable mobility and climate action in Cameroon. He'll share some perspective. What are the challenges that are currently there? What are the opportunities that are there? What are the realities? Because sometimes when they talk about sustainable mobility, sustainable transportation, it's really context specific. Sometimes when you see the reality of Europe, or maybe you go to North America, you see the reality. Sometimes when you come and you try talking about some of these things, with our reality is quite different. So Engineer Tokam, I think he will talk like for 45 minutes, I'm not sure. And then we'll have question and answers for him. But you can ask a lot of questions. He really knows what he's doing. And so thank you so much, sir. I don't know, let me make you host so that you share your screen? Okay. All right.
Okay. So let me try to share mine. So I cannot share still.
Okay, let me see. All right. I'm making you host, so if the meeting ends. Okay, I'm not seeing option for co-host. Let me just make you the host.
Okay, now I can share, I guess.
Okay.
So you can see my slide, right?
Yes.
Good. So I hope you can hear me also. So as Harrison mentioned, so can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So I'm Ulrich Tokam. So I'm a civil engineer by profession, but now I'm working in the policy space in the transport sectors with the German Agency for International Cooperation. So most of our work is actually to advise government, in transitioning to more sustainable and zero emission transport. So in my work now, I'm supporting the Kenyan government in the transitioning to electric vehicles. That's the Kenyan portfolio. Now with Senegal also, we are supporting the Senegalese government actually in improving their active mobility system with cycling and walking infrastructures in Dakar. Now we have also a new project in Cameroon called Mobility Vet Yaoundé. The project has been launched, I think, on Wednesday this week.
Yes.
So the project actually also will be working mainly with the community event Yaoundé, and it's a consortium of all European Union organizations, including the German, French, also, and it's the German, the French, and also the British. So they will be actually coming as a consortium actually to support, the transition actually to more and clean mobility in the city of Yaoundé. So maybe with my screen, let me just, So today I've been invited by Harrison. Maybe I can turn off my video because of connection issues. So good. So has been invited by Harrison actually to talk about sustainable mobility and climate action in Cameroon, where we're going to talk about the perspective, the current challenge, and the way forward. So as I mentioned, I'm a policy advisor, so mostly in the policy side now, though I still have like some technical background in terms of infrastructures development and so on. But now the focus will be on the policy development in African context. So, but why mobility and transport matters in Africa? When you look at the numbers, of percentage of people living actually in our cities, so you can easily see that Africa on average 47% of the population actually do live in our cities. So when you look at the specific case of Cameroon, it's around 56% of the population who actually live in cities, where, for example, they don't really rely on agriculture as a mode of income. So they're actually part of the people living in the main cities in our land. So the worst case normally is not the worst we receive, but it's the worst case in Gabon with 89% of the population living in an urban area. So this is actually the actual number, but when you look at now the curve and then also the growth of the urbanization in Africa, this actually will lead to like an amazing number of population living in our cities by 2050, where actually African cities will be home of an addition of 950 million people. So this actually almost 1 billion of people by 2050, that people will actually come and live in African cities. And with that, rate of urbanization, cities number will be experiencing a growing demand for convenient and efficient mobility modes in our cities. And with what, unfortunately, during the recent decades now, our government really focused, on investment in private cars with a little consideration on non-motorized transport, but also on public transport. Though they are actually the most used mode of transport in our urban areas in Africa. And this actually rate of urbanizations, but also that misinvestment in actually private vehicles related infrastructures has contributed a lot to the growing problem of air quality throughout the African continent. And when you look at the current mobility landscape for the specific case of Cameroon, we can just resume the current mobility landscape in 4 keywords. It's inefficient, expensive, dangerous, and polluting. So when you look at this image, it's actually one of the images in our main capital in Cameroon. You can easily see that actually there is no direction. So you don't know where, for example, the two ladies here as a pedestrian are going. You don't know. Here we have them, it's called in Kenya, we call them boda boda, in Cameroon, it's motor taxi. So you don't know where they are going. There is no traffic rule at these intersections. Yellow taxi also, they don't follow the rule. And then so there is actually a disorder actually in our cities. And when you look at now the transport fare, so in actually that disorder, the paratransit fare are really expensive in comparison to the average income. In Cameroon, this mix is around 36,000 francs CFA. So, and when you look at the transport fare that someone like only moving from Messasi to, I don't know, Post Central, and then the person has to pay like around like 600, this is actually $1. So it's really, really expensive compared to the average income in the country. And many people have to work on long distance on irregular, infrastructures are unsafe or absent as work. For example, to commute, to go to work, especially for teenagers, to go to the hospital, actually to go also to the market. So the level of infrastructure is really, really inefficient in our cities in Cameroon, which actually can be seen also in many other cities in Africa in general. And the inadequate public transport system. So nowadays, we know we mostly rely on the paratransit transport system, which is actually uncomfortable in our cities. It's also irregular. For example, if someone wants to move, I don't know, from one point from point A to point B in our African cities, the person doesn't know the time. At what time, for example, I can get, a reliable bus to move from point A to point B. So we don't have such adequate mode of public transport in our cities. And then it's a big problem because we cannot plan our trips according, to our exigence on a day-to-day basis. So this actually poses a lot of challenge. And when you look at the cars and motorcycles, they are always stuck in traffic because of lack of proper infrastructures that leads to congestion, but also that increase the fuel consumption across the cities. And the side effect of that is the generation of high CO2 emissions and pollutions in our cities. But when you look at now the pollution and emission in our cities, that can have actually huge damage and consequences, in our day-to-day life. So when you look at the climate impact of the current mobility practice in our cities, especially in Cameroon, we look at globally that the air pollution to which vehicular emission contributes a lot kills roughly like 600,000 people every year in Africa. This according to a report from the United Nations Environmental Program. And in Cameroon specifically, air pollution and air quality is a concern because particular matters, with diameters of 10 microns and those of 2.5 in Cameroonian cities are often 10 to 5 to 10 times beyond the limits recommended by WHO. This is actually a lot. And then we know there are also several other cities, in Africa, which actually experiencing worst case. But if you focus also in Cameroon, having on average like 7 times, beyond the the limit recommended by the WHO, we can actually see that we are already in the red zone. What about the water pollution? So when you look at the runoff from road surface, and they can have like they can also have like a lot of effects on our climate, for example, due to the oil, the heavy metal and chemicals that they can actually produce, out of vehicles. So when you look at the oil, the black oil coming from vehicles, they are really, really, really high polluting for the waters, but also for the climate vulnerability. Nowadays, we experience, like floods and storm across our cities. It was the case recently in Kenya, where in Mombasa, where, for example, floods kills like around like 200 people in cities. I think we experience such also in Cameroon, in many cities. So that climate vulnerability is also the result of our air pollution of the car CO2 emissions coming from vehicles in Africa. But also when you look at the contribution to the national emissions, so the transport sector itself contributes to roughly like 60% of the total gas emission in Cameroon. That's a lot. So if we want to meet our NDC targets, so we need actually to act on these specific points of transport emissions in our countries. And then there is more to come, so they are not going to stop. When you look at the projection of vehicle ownership in Cameroon, based on these studies targeting 2025, we can easily see that there is a growing number of like vehicle ownership for 4 and 2-wheelers in the coming years. And then when you look at also how the 2-wheelers market will grow in our cities, that actually will lead to more emission because currently we don't have like electric 2-wheelers. So what you have is ICEs, 4 and 2-wheelers. But we know that in the mobility pattern in our African cities actually most rely on 2-wheelers. So as the rate of motorization will also grow, so also the number of 2-wheelers in our African cities will actually keep growing. So and then there is a must for us actually to act on that. So some African countries, have tried, for example, to put some control measures by imposing bans or higher penalty on the importation of used vehicles. That's actually mainly for 4-wheelers because, yes, 2-wheelers, for example, are a bit like cheap for the income level in our African cities, and then people are able to buy brand new 2-wheelers. But for the case of 4-wheelers, we actually most relying on used vehicles, mainly coming from the global north. And then, for example, in Cameroon, they try to impose bans, on importation of like used vehicle from Japan, but also from America, and also some parts of the Europe like Belgium and France. In Uganda, they did the same. Ghana, Kenya, it was the same. But why it didn't work? Because if you look at the number, we compare the numbers, starting before 2011 and the number of today, we can easily see that, for example, the importation of used vehicles just, keep growing in our cities. But what is that? Why is the problem? Because, we don't understand why is the problem. Because after the imposition of those bans or higher penalty, we could have been, expecting that, the rate of importation of used vehicle could be like, reduced in our cities, but that was not the case, according to many studies. And then now, in order to understand why those current measures don't work in our countries in Africa, so we try actually to understand and to study the political economy of vehicle dependency in Cameroon. And then one we find actually was really amazing. So, that based on actually the retention of colonial automobile dependent planning system and land use patterns, for example, in Cameroon from the British and from France, actually, we have been trying to prioritize, automobile infrastructure, especially for roads. And then that really encouraged, over the years, the automobile consumption culture. And then that leads to inadequate investment in other mode of transport. For example, we really invest in building roads in our countries, in our cities, and then forgetting also to invest, in proper railway system, bicycle, and walking lane. And then that inadequate investment really entrenched the motorized transport dependency in our countries. And then in that entrenched motorized transport dependency, coupled with like weak regulations for vehicle emission standards, and but also low level of income of our population, but also the limited numbers of locally produced vehicles. We don't produce vehicles, for example, in Africa. Only South Africa and Morocco are trying to produce vehicles on the African continent, and also the low cost, of labor and vehicle repairs. So all this actually stimulate demand of supplies of used vehicle in our cities. So you look at, for example, the consequence of that colonial effects, but also that colonial mentality of like that automobile dependency of the 19th centuries actually continues follow us today with that, spirit of prioritization of automobile, cultures in our cities. So there's also a huge work to do in background in terms of like, raising awareness, both for population, but also for the public making sectors. And but yes, we can say, okay, so we are dead now in Africa, but no, there's actually hope around the corner. So there are like some initiatives going on across the continent. And then to talk about Cameroon, so I was mentioned earlier the Move Yaoundé project, and the Move Yaoundé project actually will bring actually some solutions to overcome these issues by improving the resilience of the transport system to climate change and shocks through nature-based solution and circular economy principle. They will also work with the paratransit system. They will also work, in improving our active mobility system across the city. So they will work closely with the community event de Yaoundé. And also the European partnerships also financing the feasibility studies for bus rapid transit in Yaoundé. One was also under feasibility studies under the finance of the World Bank. That one will be for the BRT of Douala. And also the European Union is also financing a lot of capacity building project for community event, for the personnel of community event of Douala and Yaoundé. This actually following the recommendation of the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan of the city of Yaoundé, commissioned by GIZ sometimes back in 2016. So, but when you look at all these initiatives, they are all funded by, foreign, money. When you look at it, the German corporation, the European Union, Republic Française, and then there's like retail investment from our government in Africa, in order to implement such a solution. So there's also a work to do. There's an awareness to raise amount, our government in order to invest more in such kind of initiative and not always waiting for Europeans, to come and support our initiatives in our countries. So, but someone may ask, maybe the solution is then, to transition to electric vehicles, like, as a magic. But no, it won't work, because when you look at these pictures, these actually parks of used vehicles in South Africa. South Africa was one of the first countries in Africa to import electric vehicles on the continent. And then you look at this park of used vehicles, and then this will actually lead to several problems. Why? Because what's happening with IC vehicles, where used IC vehicles have been imported to Africa, will also happen with used electric vehicles. This is actually the projection of used electric vehicles that may come actually in low and middle income countries, mostly in Africa and Asia. When we talk about African Asia, we understand that those at least 80% of those used vehicles will come to Africa. So when you look at the curve, you can easily see that the curve just keep growing. So what's happening with used IC vehicle will also happen with used electric vehicles, and there is a must also for us to act on it. So I will invite you all to go and read this report by UNEP on electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries in lower and middle income countries, life cycle impact and issues. So this report actually will give you an understanding of what's happening now with first the IC global market, but also what will happen with the used electric vehicles market, especially with the targets of low and middle income countries. So, according now to the global partnership on used vehicles and used electric vehicles, there are some challenges associated with that. So the main challenge, for example, associated with the electric vehicle is that many countries now are reluctant to promote electrification of mobility without batteries and end-of-life solutions. For example, what's happening in Kenya is that they are developing, for example, their electric mobility policy, without considering that kind of life, no solution. So it's good to say, okay, we have actually an electric vehicle policy. But if you don't think globally, but what will happen in 100 years when everybody will be using electric vehicles, but how will, the disposal scheme will look like? For example, after 15, 20, 25 years of using your electric vehicles, what will happen to the batteries? What will happen actually to the components of the vehicle? So there is a need for a holistic, approach in approaching these kind of questions, especially in African countries. And then we need also to avoid, the mistake of the global north. For example, what the global north has been doing in the 19th century is actually also paying off today. Like nowadays, now they are trying, to prioritize active mobility because they are actually seeing the effects of air pollution and also global emission of what they've been doing, for the past centuries. And then no, in Africa also there is no proper like e-waste collection program. So we can forget about, the electric like vehicles that even, in our like day-to-day life, there's no proper management of waste in our cities. And then that will also happen in for vehicles nowadays with IC, and then also in the coming years with electric vehicles. But also the reuse of lithium-ion batteries is complicated. Like the technology is not yet masters in even in the global north. Actually, they don't master yet the technology. So and then you can imagine what would be the case in the global south, especially in Africa. And then also the recycling not yet happening. So I know in Kenya we have like many of electric vehicle. In Cameroon, we don't yet. I from the latest statistic, I think in Cameroon we have like less than 10 electric vehicle properly operating in the country. So there's a bit of the challenge, in Cameroon in order to transition to this kind of technology. But we know that we cannot avoid the advance of technology, and then we know that in the coming years we'll be using this kind of vehicle. More companies, either in the private sector, in the public sectors, will actually start importing electric vehicles. And then now we need to think about all those challenges. But to every challenge also associated an opportunity. So based on those challenges, we can easily see some opportunities. For example, you can ask our question, but how to design electric vehicles and electric vehicle battery to facilitate longevity and riskability in low and middle income countries. So these kind of questions we need actually to ask our government before, starting, prospering or evaluating that way of transitioning to electric vehicles should ask themselves. So how to design those kind of vehicles, but also their component to facilitate their longevity and the riskability after their end of life. But also how to ensure that used electric vehicles and their batteries can be repaired in destination countries, because we'll be accommodating a lot of those used electric vehicles, but we don't have actually the labor to repair them. So how can you ensure that the transition also to electric vehicles can also accommodate this challenge? But also the reuse of lithium-ion batteries for other purpose. For example, you can see I saw in so many countries where they use it, for example, to charge, I don't know, like solar panels, and to generate electricity. So we should think about the second life of those components of coming out of the electric vehicle market. So when talking about like electric, talk about mobility or sustainable mobility in general, we saw like some of those challenges and also some of those opportunities of nowadays with the ICE vehicles, with the carbon emissions, but also in coming years with the transition to electric vehicles. So the solution now is actually to think globally. So we should actually adopt like a holistic approach by prioritizing like active mobility and public transport. So if you look at, I will invite you actually to read one of my recent paper on how to make active mobility and public transport a winning combination in African cities. So when you look at these pictures, you see that actually once we should prioritize or recommend actually a greater amount of population should start actually working. So the good thing and difference in Africa is that 70% of the population is already working. So it's actually a good start. But now the challenge they experience is that they don't have like proper working infrastructures, to commit in our day-to-day journey. So our government actually should act on this and then providing pedestrian, but also people with disability with proper working infrastructure, working and cycling infrastructures. So we should also now start investing in cycling and micro mobility things. So when you go to Europe now, in many developed countries, you see that people walking there with the electric scooters. You find them charging infrastructures like almost everywhere across the cities, and then people also now are preferring now to cycle instead of like buying like more expensive car to commit to their day-to-day work every day. So in Africa, we have the opportunity also to invest because they're actually cheaper. So walking and cycling infrastructure are cheaper as compared to, like, I don't know, expressway and highways in Africa. So they're actually cheaper. So in terms of like economic benefit, we can have a lot. And then we cannot even compare their now climate and environmental benefit. So there is actually a must for our African countries, if you want to meet our NDC targets, to invest a lot in walking and cycling infrastructures. But also we cannot avoid public transport because there's also a need to commit, long distance across the city, but also to move from one city to another one. And then you cannot move from one city to another one, for example, by cycling or by walking. So we should have actually proper public transport system in our cities. And then there are like very good initiatives actually coming on in Africa. Dakar in Senegal recently launched their fully electric BRT system in the city. Actually, that can improve the efficiency of the public transport in the city by almost like 70%. So this is actually a good initiative. I know that, for example, Nairobi is planning 5, corridors for electric BRT in the city. Yaoundé is planning, Douala is planning, but we don't know yet if the BRT will be electric or not. We know that if you adopt like ICE BRT system, yes, we'll be actually improving the public transport system across the city, but we are not reducing the emission. So our city also and government should start thinking about, efficient way on how we can improve both the efficiencies of the operation, but also the reduction of our emission. So some other mode of transport, less important, like share cars, private cars, and plane should also be considered because we cannot move from Cameroon, I don't know, to the US by car or by walking. So this is actually almost impossible. So we should use actually plane less for our movement and more of walking and cycling in our cities. And that way we can actually achieve our emission targets. But as a youth, what could be, our role in, also fighting up against those emissions from the transport sectors? So one thing is about public awareness. So we should also engage in campaigns to raise awareness about the environmental impact of our current mobility practice, as is the case today with these webinars, where actually we are trying to bring on the table some of these issues. So it should be the case actually for everyone to engage in such dialogue, in such public awareness, and also to adopt green commuting practice. So I know there's actually some challenge by moving by bike in our cities, but by actually we cannot, I don't know, like invite people to adopt those kind of green mode of transport if you yourself as an advocate, you don't also use them. So there's also a nose actually to preach by the example, and then also to start using a such net zero kind of transport. And then also we can also look at the community education programs. So conduct like workshop, webinar like this one, to educate the population, to educate also our policymakers on about the environmental impact of their transportation choice and alternative solutions, sustainable options. So I've actually mentioned some of the alternative sustainable transport options we can actually adopt easily in our cities and low cost. I think there's also a need for youth representation. So nowadays, when you look at, I don't know, the administrations in our country, especially in Cameroon, I don't know what's the case actually in other African countries, but when you look at the average age of people, working in the administration, you can easily see that they are turning like 60 and 70. So there is a lack of youth representations in our administration, and the youth actually are the leaders of tomorrow. So advocate for youth representation in decision-making bodies related to environmental policy in our countries. So I wasn't expected to be like so long. So I hope my presentation actually tried to provide a bit of the context and the state of urban mobility in our African cities, the challenge, the way forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, engineer. That was the presentation was so rich that I was following and even forgot myself. So thank you so much. It was quite really, I mean, a lot of statistics, a lot of realities that sometimes we get to overlook or underlook or even are not aware of. So that is really great. And since I don't know, since we have like before we go to question and answers, because I'm seeing a couple of questions already coming, maybe since we have, can you maybe do like, I'm not sure, like a 2 minutes or 3 minutes recap of this presentation in French. Someone just requested that, can you do a summary in French? English like this, especially with technical terms. Sometimes it's so hard for people to really comprehend. I know
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so let me try to do it in French. So, merci déjà. Donc aujourd'hui, le sujet était justement de parler de la mobilité durable et des actions climatiques au Cameroun et comment est-ce que les jeunes, par exemple, peuvent apporter leurs contributions pour pouvoir surmonter ces défis. Et nous avons commencé déjà par mentionner pourquoi est-ce que la mobilité et le transport étaient importantes pour l'Afrique. J'ai mentionné en fait dans la présentation que les projections en termes de croissance démographique dans nos villes sont en train de croître et d'ici 2050, par exemple, il y aura un superflu de 950 millions de personnes dans nos villes. Et en fait, cette croissance démographique très accélérée dans nos villes africaines, qui sont couplées en fait au déficit d'investissement, par exemple, dans des modes de transport un peu plus actifs comme la marche à pied, les déplacements à vélo et les transports en public, vont contribuer grandement, par exemple, au problème de qualité de l'air dans nos villes africaines. Et si nous regardons, par exemple, comment est-ce que nous nous déplaçons dans nos villes aujourd'hui, comment est-ce que notre mobilité est représentée dans nos villes, nous pouvons résumer que la mobilité, en fait, elle est inefficace dans nos villes. Le système de transport, il est vraiment inefficace. Il est très cher, il est dangereux, il est très polluant. Si nous regardons le système de transport informel, c'est-à-dire le déplacement avec des taxis jaunes, avec des mini-cars, et si nous comparons par exemple à combien est-ce qu'une personne dans les ménages gagne par mois, nous pouvons en fait conclure que le prix, bien le coût du transport par trajet, il est extrêmement cher compte tenu de ce qu'une personne peut gagner par mois. Et plusieurs personnes, notamment les personnes vulnérables, ici par personnes vulnérables, on entend les personnes âgées, on entend les personnes à mobilité réduite, qu'on appelle communément les handicapés. Ils ont souvent tendance à marcher des très longues distances, sur des infrastructures qui ne sont pas adaptées et qui sont vraiment insécures pour eux, pour aller par exemple dans des marchés, pour aller dans des églises, des écoles. Et ceci aussi a un impact par exemple sur le nombre d'accidents dans nos villes chaque année. Et malheureusement, en fait, le système de transport public que nous avons actuellement dans nos villes, il est carrément inadéquat, il est irrégulier, par exemple, ne donne pas un confort absolu pour les populations urbaines. Et si nous regardons, par exemple, les voitures et les engins à deux roues, nous voyons comment est-ce que nos villes sont tellement embouteillées. Et ceci, en fait, augmente la consommation de carburant et aussi entraîne par exemple une émission carbone très élevée dans nos villes. Mais ceci a un impact très négatif sur l'environnement, notamment avec la qualité de l'air, qui tue environ 600 000 personnes par an en Afrique. Et au Cameroun, si nous regardons par exemple les particules de diamètre 10 microns et celles de 2,5 microns dans nos villes, elles sont parfois, le taux est parfois 5 à 10 fois et non au-dessus des limites recommandées par l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, qui sont donc très dangereuses pour notre santé. Nous avons aussi un impact, par exemple, sur la pollution de l'eau, mais aussi sur notre vulnérabilité climatique. Nous voyons aujourd'hui comment est-ce que nos villes en Afrique souffrent de pollution, de flotte et d'inondations dans nos villes. Et nous voyons en fait comment est-ce que ça détruit nos ponts, comment est-ce que les maisons, par exemple, sont emportées dans des torrents et tout. Donc, tout ceci, en fait, résulte, en fait, des émissions qui ont été faites dans les années passées. C'est vrai que l'Afrique contribue vraiment faiblement aux émissions de carbone dans nos villes. C'est vrai que les émissions précédentes ont été notamment émises par des pays développés pendant la révolution industrielle. Mais aujourd'hui, nous en payons le prix. Et nous devons donc, en fait, jouer sur ça et nous devons, en fait, c'est le moment d'agir afin de pouvoir éviter les émissions futures et de pouvoir donc s'adapter aux éventuelles conséquences d'aujourd'hui. Mais en fait, ce qui fait peur, c'est ce qui est en train d'arriver parce que lorsque nous regardons, par exemple, à quelle projection est-ce que nos villes sont en train d'être motorisées, nous voyons que les engins à 2 et les engins à 4 roues, par exemple, vont continuer de s'accroître dans nos villes et dans nos pays, ce qui va aussi continuer à accroître les émissions que nous avons aujourd'hui. Et j'ai mentionné en fait que dans cette mouvance d'accroissement de la pollution de l'air, les gouvernements africains ont essayé de mettre, par exemple, d'imposer des mesures avec des pénalités sur l'importation des véhicules de seconde main, on appelle les véhicules d'occasion, dans le langage courant. Par exemple, au Cameroun, maintenant, on a dit, OK, on importe les véhicules depuis les 10 ans. Au Kenya, ils sont un peu plus stricts. Tu ne peux pas importer un véhicule depuis les 5 ans. Au Ghana, 7 ans. En Ouganda, c'est 15 ans. Et tout. Donc, nous voyons que les gouvernements ont essayé de mettre ces mesures en place afin de pouvoir donc limiter l'importation des véhicules de seconde rang. Mais ce qui a été observé, c'est que même après l'imposition en fait de ces pénalités, l'importation des véhicules d'occasion n'a pas réduit dans nos pays africains. Et donc, nous avons essayé un peu de comprendre pourquoi est-ce que même après l'imposition des taxes tellement élevées sur l'importation des véhicules de seconde main dans nos villes africaines, nous n'avons pas pu toujours réduire le taux d'importation. Donc, nous avons essayé donc de comprendre en fait l'aspect politico-économique de la dépendance des véhicules au Cameroun particulièrement. Et nous avons compris en fait que nous avons en fait eu cet héritage de l'époque précoloniale avec leur façon de planifier leur ville qui ne dépendait exclusivement que de l'automobile à cette époque-là. Et donc, avec donc, cet héritage de l'époque coloniale, nous avons donc tenté de prioriser en fait les infrastructures qui vont uniquement donner l'avantage aux routes et aux véhicules, aux engins motorisés. Donc, on a donc mis en nos populations dans cette culture de la voiture. Aujourd'hui, lorsque vous voyez par exemple un jeune, lorsqu'il travaille, il ne sait pas par exemple qu'il peut utiliser le transport public toute sa vie. La première des choses qui lui vient à l'esprit, c'est d'acheter une voiture. Il ne veut pas savoir est-ce que la voiture que j'achète par exemple est en train peut-être d'émettre un standard quelconque dans mon pays. Il ne veut pas savoir. Tout ce qu'il veut, c'est une voiture, qu'elle soit polluante ou non. Et aussi, donc, nos gouvernements, en fait, dans cette mouvance, ont tenté d'investir plutôt dans d'autres modes de transport, notamment dans les routes, au lieu aussi de se focaliser, par exemple, sur d'autres modes de transport plus efficaces comme les voies ferrées, les voies cyclables, les pistes cyclables, mais aussi des passages piétons. Donc, il y a eu très peu d'investissements au cours des récentes années vers ces modes de transport qui sont en fait verts. Ce sont des modes de transport verts et malheureusement, les gouvernements n'ont pas pu mettre l'accent sur ces mots. Et on a donc pu encourager donc cette transport, motorized transport dependency, je ne sais pas comment le dire en français. Donc, en fait, les populations ont eu cette culture, en fait, de la voiture motorisée. Et donc, ça a pu donc stimuler, en fait, la demande des véhicules d'occasion dans nos pays africains. Mais comme je disais, en fait, on commence à se réveiller un peu en Afrique, notamment au Cameroun, avec des initiatives vertes en train d'être implémentées. Nous avons un nouveau projet appelé Mobilité verte, Yaoundé. Ce projet, normalement, se focalisera sur comment est-ce qu'on peut repenser le système de transport adapté informel dans la ville de Yaoundé, comment est-ce qu'on peut développer en fait un réseau de pistes cyclables et un réseau de passages piétons sécurisé dans la ville de Yaoundé. On a aussi d'autres initiatives, notamment financées par des bailleurs de fonds européens, notamment les bus rapides transit dans la ville de Yaoundé, dans la ville de Douala, mais aussi des renforcements des capacités des staffs dans les communautés urbaines, dans les deux grandes villes du Cameroun qui sont Douala et Yaoundé. Donc, après tout ça, on pouvait donc se dire, en fait, est-ce que le passage, en fait, en véhicule électrique doit venir résoudre tous ces problèmes dans nos villes? Mais j'ai dit non. Parce que lorsqu'on regarde en fait cette figure, on voit que ça aussi, ce sont des dépôts de véhicules électriques qui ont atteint le cycle de vie et qui sont déposés comme ça dans les parkings. Or, malheureusement, ces véhicules électriques ont des batteries qui ont des composantes chimiques très dangereuses pour l'environnement. Elles vont rester dans ces véhicules, elles vont se détériorer et en fait, toutes ces composantes vont se retrouver dans du sol et qui vont se retrouver dans les eaux, dans la nourriture que nous mangeons et au long terme, en fait, de causer des problèmes de santé. Et si nous regardons donc la courbe de croissance de comment est-ce que ces véhicules électriques d'occasion également vont se retrouver dans les pays en développement, notamment en Afrique et en Asie, nous pouvons comprendre en fait que ce qui est en train de se passer, ce qui s'est toujours passé avec des véhicules à essence, par exemple, se passera également avec des véhicules électriques dans nos villes africaines. Donc également, cette transition avec des véhicules non électriques en Afrique pourra aussi poser d'autres challenges parce qu'en fait, dans nos villes africaines, par exemple, on est un peu réticent avec la promotion des véhicules électriques qui n'utilisent pas, par exemple, des batteries et on n'a pas cette culture, en fait, de circular économie et comment est-ce qu'on peut penser, en fait, sur la chaîne de valeur, en fait, d'un produit. On n'a pas, en fait, cette culture dans nos villes africaines. On n'a pas aussi un système de collecte d'ordures assez efficace. C'est le cas, par exemple, des ordures ménagères. Ça sera également, c'est également déjà le cas pour les véhicules à essence et ça sera toujours le cas pour les véhicules électriques. Ça veut donc dire que si on n'adopte pas un système de collecte d'ordures très efficace et comment est-ce qu'on peut en fait jouer sur le principe du recyclage dans nos villes africaines, on aura toujours ces problèmes. Mais il y a aussi donc quelques opportunités de recherche pour nos villes africaines, c'est-à-dire avant de se lancer peut-être bêtement, entre guillemets, donc l'adoption des véhicules électriques, on a quelques questions à nous poser. C'est comment est-ce que on pourra en fait adapter les véhicules électriques au marché africain? Comment est-ce que, par exemple, le développement des véhicules électriques inclut aussi des batteries et comment est-ce qu'on peut améliorer, par exemple, les durées de vie et avant de les adopter dans nos villes? Et comment est-ce qu'on peut s'assurer, en fait, que ces véhicules seront réparés une fois que nous les aurons produits? Par exemple, si on ne produit pas assez de main-d'œuvre locale qui pourra aider à réparer ces véhicules électriques, en fait, on aura péché dans cette transition pour les véhicules électriques. Et donc, la solution, non, c'est d'adopter en fait une approche un peu holistique, c'est-à-dire une combinaison entre les modes de transport actifs et les modes de transport public. Donc, on doit investir plus dans les modes de transport actifs, c'est-à-dire dans la marche à pied, dans des pistes cyclables et tout, et dans les transports en public, et investir très peu en fait dans des véhicules privés et dans des vols par avion. Donc, ce n'est qu'en faisant cela que nous pouvons en fait arriver à nos objectifs en fait d'émissions carbone, notamment liés au transport. Mais aussi, les jeunes ont une part de responsabilité dans cette transition, dans cette campagne, c'est que les jeunes en fait doivent aussi s'engager à pouvoir en fait solliciter d'autres jeunes et lutter contre ces effets du changement climatique néfaste que nous expérimentons dans nos villes, adopter aussi des bonnes pratiques en termes de transport vert, c'est-à-dire ne pas trouver que ceux qui marchent à pied sont toujours des pauvres, ne pas trouver que ceux qui se déplacent à vélo sont toujours aussi des pauvres, utiliser des transports en public, aussi essayer d'éduquer la masse, c'est-à-dire se rendre dans son village lorsqu'on voit une personne qui adopte par exemple un mode de transport qui pollue l'environnement, c'est de lui dire que monsieur, en fait, ce que tu es en train de faire nous coûtera cher parce que nous n'avons qu'une seule planète, il n'existe pas deux planètes. Et si nous ne la préservons pas, par exemple, nous allons tous disparaître. Donc, j'espère que mon résumé en français a été utile. Non, merci.
Wow. Merci beaucoup, merci beaucoup. J'espère que tout le monde. I hope everyone really understood. I mean, that was really a brief and very detailed summary again in French. And thank you so much, engineer. I know there are a couple of questions. I know a couple of people want to ask questions. Because I saw one question on the chat. Let me just ask, maybe you can respond. So we'll take like 3 or 4 questions and then we'll go to the next presenter. It's really an interesting discussion. Someone asked that, looking at the current situation in Cameroon, don't you think that the culture around the transportation sector is already oriented towards reducing greenhouse gas emission, even if it is involuntarily? So what do you think? What do you have to say about that? And, and that's a question that someone asked. But before we go to others, I also wanted to ask my own question. Like, you see that there's one graph you showed about motorized transport dependency, which is increasing in Cameroon, which is increasing across African countries. And somehow we feel like, sometimes I feel like there's a cultural nuance around dependence, or maybe like around getting a car. You know, our culture in Cameroon is like, when you car sometimes is attributed to social status.
Yeah.
And when a young person, I've had this conversation with a couple of young people, when they start working and they think of money, one thing they think about is getting a car. For me, I don't see car like an absolute necessity. So I only get a car when I think I need a car. And so I think like that. But how do you see the cultural nuances influencing our dependency on motorized transportation, and how does it really affect us? So that's my own question. And any other person can ask a question. So you can just answer that.
Yeah. So I think your two questions are a bit like linked to each other. So
Yeah.
maybe I will try to provide an answer in English, and then I guess that the person is a French speaking, so I will try also to answer in French. So I actually try to understand. Also that was actually one of our questions, at the beginning. In one of our recent studies, actually, we try, as I told you, to understand that political economy of vehicle dependence in Cameroon. And then from the interview and so on, it was actually appears clear that we got it from the retention of colonial automobile dependency planning. So I want to look at how we plan our roads in Cameroon, for example. I know I started working in the private sector before leaving Cameroon. And once, for example, a road project is planned, in design, and then you have actually dedicated cycling lane, dedicated pedestrian lanes, and then you have actually the carriage way. Once like projects, find itself to be like expensive, exceeding the budget allocated maybe by the donors to build that road, the first thing we do in Cameroon is to remove all the cycling and pedestrian lanes. So why? Just because we think that cars, four-wheelers actually are more important, in our day-to-day life than people actually walking. So this actually is a fact in our, and then it's not only the case for Cameroon, in many African cities the case. So we actually only tarmac the roads, and then by forgetting that people actually will be walking along this road actually to go even to the market and then to buy things, and then they don't have actually where to go. The perfect scenario for this is actually Nairobi. Nairobi actually built their expressway, and then by forgetting that people are living, along the expressway, and you find actually people crossing a road with limitation of 160 kilometers per hour actually to cross the way because they forgot about pedestrian crossing bridge and so on across 22 kilometers of the railway. So this actually our vehicle dependency cultures in our city. So there's, I would say no. So the current mobility pattern in our city doesn't actually consider that emission reduction only. We have that opportunity because we walk a lot, but now all the vehicles actually we are purchasing in our African cities are used vehicles, and then that will lead to more and more emissions. So I will say no. And yes, why? Why do you have it? As I say, the explanation is just based on that retention Korea because there is now a way to educate our policymakers to make them understand that a minister can commit from his place to his workplace by cycling. So I've been to Bogota in Colombia, and then there was like a conference where the mayor actually come, commit to the conference being made by bicycle. So also our leaders, our political leaders and political makers can also start by, showing the examples that, we need such kind of infrastructure in our cities. It's not for poor, no. Actually, that will also lead to what we call a just transition and a fair mobility. Because if everybody, for example, is working, if everybody is cycling, you can never know, what you have in my bank account. So people will not come and showcase with their Ferrari and so on in our cities. And then we can have like actually a just societies if we move toward this kind of transport system. So I hope that I've tried to answer the questions. But maybe for the French-speaking guys, I can just provide a short summary. So, ce que je disais tantôt, en fait, c'est que non, malheureusement, dans nos villes, oui, le mode de transport que nous adoptons ne va pas en fait dans cette direction de réduction des émissions de carbone. C'est vrai que vous allez me dire, oui, en Afrique, 70% de la population marche, mais le problème, non, c'est que les véhicules que nous avons sont tous polluants. C'est-à-dire, aujourd'hui, nous avons des véhicules d'occasion que nous importons dans nos villes parce qu'elles sont importées à 95% des véhicules. Seulement 5% des véhicules, par exemple, sont neufs. Et les 5%, en fait, ce ne sont que des véhicules d'État, c'est-à-dire ce sont des véhicules qui sont achetés pour les ministres et autres, mais toute la population, en fait, utilise des véhicules d'occasion. Et si vous regardez bien, vous allez comprendre que la conception des véhicules neufs dans nos villes, ce qu'on appelle new vehicle, dans nos villes, par exemple, ce sont des véhicules d'occasion qui ont déjà été utilisés aux États-Unis, qui ont déjà été utilisés en Belgique et en France. Et c'est ça que nous, on conçoit comme véhicules neufs dans nos villes. Et c'est un problème parce que ces véhicules arrivent avec déjà 10 ans, 15 ans d'âge et leur efficacité, en fait, n'est plus la même. Ce qui fait que nous allons les prendre, nous allons les utiliser pour 10, 15 ans et la pollution, en fait, ne va que s'accentuer au fil des années. Donc, nous devons, en fait, essayer d'adopter des modes de transport beaucoup plus propres, c'est-à-dire ne pensons pas toujours que la route, c'est-à-dire des highways, c'est des solutions, en fait, pour nos systèmes de transport dans les villes. Non, nous n'avons pas, par exemple, dans nos villes, très peu de villes en Afrique ont un système de transport public fiable. Nous n'avons pas de métro, nous n'avons même pas de bus rapide transit. Donc, je pense qu'il est encore temps pour nous, en tant qu'Africains, de pouvoir donc justement jouer et d'impacter nos populations ou alors d'amener nos dirigeants à adopter ces modes de transport propres si nous voulons en fait réduire nos émissions et avoir une vie un peu plus calme sur le continent. Donc, j'espère que ça vous aidera.
Thank you so much, Engineer. I think there's one more question. Adamu just raised his hand. So maybe if you can just go ahead and ask your question and then Tokam will answer and then we'll go to the next speaker. I know transport is so interesting and the information is so much. So Adamu, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you again for giving me the floor. I would like to thank also our presenter, Yurish, for the brand presentation. I learned much, and I will not go into detail to say all what I learned, but I really want to know from you. You've tried to solve the problem by cutting the problem from its roots, being the stopping the air pollution. But I want to know from you, what are the actions or the projects you are having in hand to reduce the already existing pollution in the atmosphere? Because from what I saw, most of your actions are oriented towards how to stop or how to reduce the rates of this emission of this particulate matter in the atmosphere. But what is already existing? What are the actions that have been taken, or what you intend to take in order to reduce or remove all these gases in the atmosphere? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Adamu, for this question. So yes, you are right. So sometimes we say to solve something, permanently, we have to go at the root and then cut the problem, from the source. Okay, so nowadays we have what we call vehicle conversion. So, for example, in Kenya, there are like several startups, moving toward that conversion from like ICE two-wheelers to electric two-wheelers. So there are actually initiatives going on in South Africa. In the city of Stellenbosch, there is like actually a huge project, moving toward the conversion of minibus to electric buses. So there are several initiatives ongoing. So, but the problem also with the conversion is that after the conversion of from IC vehicles to electric vehicles, there are also some component left apart that needs to be, considered in that circular economy principle. So there's not like, let's say, prepackaged solutions to that. So we try also to adapt as we are moving. So the only thing we can do nowadays actually to put some to track actually our emissions. So you say, okay, let's implement this measure. We track, for example, the before and after emission in one corridors, and then we see, and we can easily assess if the implemented measure, for example, has been that's led to a reduction of our emissions or not. So we can adopt actually those conversions, retrofitting from ICs to electric vehicles. We can do that easily in our African cities. But what needs to be done now is actually the education of the mass, is actually to train again our town planners, because we still, when you look at the percentage of paved road in our, in our African city, we can say there is a lot to do. There's a lot to do in Africa, and then it's time now to say, okay, we are building new cities. Cities are actually growing. So why are we not? What to do, for example, in order to avoid, the application of the same mistake, is actually by education, by educating the population, by educating our planners, also by educating our policy makers. So there are initiatives going on in order to mitigate, in order to go against that, but they are not quite effective. So the most effective thing is actually to act at the planning stage. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I see someone has another question again in on the chat. Let's just look at it, and then why Franklin will be preparing his presentation. So I'm reading this question from Jerry. He said, please, is using electric vehicles an absolute must for us to speak of sustainable transport? Because it's really far-fetched in Cameroon. Yeah, I know, like Tokam said in his presentation that less than 10 people, 10 electric vehicles are in Cameroon. He said also, situation in Cameroon could, the nature of the road, that during the dry season, be linked to transport sustainability problems. So, engineer, I don't know if you have a response to that. Another person, let me just go through it. Another person, Marilyn said, yes, having a vehicle in Cameroon is attributed to social status, but we cannot deny the fact that commuting is somehow unreliable. Like if you look at our cities, for example, Douala, the public transport itself is very unreliable. Like you see what Sokatu does, and maybe here in Yaoundé as well. So maybe any thoughts on those two questions so that we go to the next presenter. Of course, these questions can continue, and because so let's just hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so thank you for the question. So yes, maybe let me start with marine point of view. Yes, you are right. So yes, having owning like a vehicle is associated to like a social status in our city just because people they don't have options. So and I'm working for the Germans, and usually when I'm going to Germany, all my bosses, for example, they are coming to the office with bicycles. You know, some of them are walking, but they are paid like I don't know how many times my salaries, and then they are earning I don't know how many times the salary of a minister in Cameroon, and then for them it's no more a problem because actually you are right. They have opportunities, they have access to safe and reliable like working and cycling infrastructures in their city. So I also guess and I trust, I believe 100% that if you have also such opportunities in our cities, if you have like dedicated cycling and safe infrastructure, people actually will rather cycling, instead of like, taking like a yellow taxis to commute to work or to go to school. I'm pretty sure. So people are just continue relying on vehicles just because they don't have actually alternatives. They don't have the opportunities. And then yes, as I mentioned, if you look at the pyramid actually I showcased during my presentation, you will see that, let me try to put it, you will see that private cars is actually at the bottom, of the pyramid. So what we are actually promoting is actually more on active mobility and public transport. So you see we have like walking, we have cycling and micro mobility, and then we have public transport. So this is actually what actually we are promoting. So we can go green without electric vehicles. That's a fact. So we can do that. So but now if you want to go, okay, we said we have BRT line with IC buses. So we know that if you have like internal combustion engines for our like buses and train, so the long term effect they will still lead to pollution. But what we are transitioning, we want to be net zero by 2050. So net zero means that there is like no emission, and then to have no emissions meaning that even in our public transport fleet, we should have, for example, we should have electric buses, we should have, for example, electric trams and so on. So this is actually why we are keeping mentioning about electric vehicles, but it's not always about electric vehicles for four-wheelers, but you're also talking about electrifying actually our public transport system. But please keep in mind that, to go green, the easiest way is actually to invest more and more in active mobility, which is actually walking and cycling.
Okay, thank you so much, engineer. That was, like I said, this transport topic, mobility, it's so broad, and you guys, everyone can see how the presentation was so condensed, but and also very rich. So there are a lot of things that we need to dissect. Another thing is road safety. How our roads are road safe in Cameroon. For example, active mobility, cycling, and micro mobility. For example, riding a bicycle, we don't have cycling lane in Cameroon anyway. It's very dangerous in Cameroon. I was in a conversation a couple of days ago, and there were some guys in the Netherlands who were talking about cycling. Of course, the Netherlands is the heart of cycling in the world. But I was just sharing perspective from Cameroon. Cycling in Cameroon, it's very dangerous for pedestrians. I realized I saw a student going to school on a bicycle. The way they were struggling, it's so hard. So some of these things need to change, and we start these conversations, raise this awareness. When we get the information, when we get the knowledge, we need to hold our policymakers, because all this thing comes to policies. If people who are designing roads, they don't know this thing, our town planners. So all these issues, they need to come to play. And it's interesting to see how this conversation is going. You see that there are a lot of things that we need to really focus on in order for things to change in our country. So there'll be a series of this conversation, of this webinar. And okay, Engineer Tokam will be here. More topics will be coming. And I hope that with these things, we can really get an understanding and try to see how things can change in our community. Like now, if I'm voting for a local leader in my locality, maybe these parliamentarians, lawmakers, these are some of the things you question them about. What are they going to do? What are they going to? Bills are passed in parliament. What happens? Like Tokam said, he's advising governments. Policy is very important. We activists can talk and talk and talk, and if these policymakers don't act, sometimes the change will really be difficult to come. They always say change when it comes to sustainability and climate action, we need to look at systemic change as well as individual action. Systemic change only comes through policies. And policies are not made by people. Policies are made by these policymakers. But we as civil society, we as young people, we as the citizens, we can influence our policymakers. We know how the climate movement is going globally, climate litigation and all these things. It's because people are empowered. They know what is happening. They know the realities. So these are conversations that I hope that going forward, we will learn more and then try to collaborate and work on campaigns. Like if you see some of the, what do we do as young people? We need to advocate. We need to raise awareness. This webinar is one of them. There are things that we might not know, but I was reading a couple of documents about the urban mobility plan in Cameroon. I saw that some of these issues are not necessarily finances, because the government talks about lack of finances and all these things, but sometimes it's misappropriation of finances. Sometimes they put money in things that are not really, that does not really serve the population long term. Because of course, when it comes to international donors financing projects, they want to see the impact. So governments sometimes focus on the immediate impact and they don't look at it long term. Again, Engineer Tokam knows best about how some of these things function. But thank you so much. It's really a rich presentation, and I hope that going forward, some of these conversations will continue. And he said something, we need to research a lot on this transportation sector, get our facts right, and advocating means that you need to know the facts in Cameroon. Like the project that they Move Yaoundé that just started, we need to follow it up, see how things are going, see how the government is involved, how are young people represented in some of these issues. Young people need to be represented. You as civil society, you need to be there. So it's really important. And thank you again so much, Engineer. So we'll go to, it's almost, we just have 30 minutes left. So I hope that Franklin can do a short presentation. We didn't really want to end on the transportation sector. We wanted to also go to air pollution, get some perspective, some generalities around air pollution. Because in the next series of webinars, we'll have, I know there are some engineering students here that want to really learn some things about the air pollution itself. So I would like Ulrich to talk about, we'll be talking about the impact of air pollution on health, and then maybe talk about air quality in Cameroon, and maybe share any other thoughts that he has, other statistics. So thank you so much, Ulrich. Ulrich also, thank you so much, Franklin, for joining. And I know your connection might not be stable, but we hope that your presentation can go fine. Franklin is environmental scientist, and he's in the University of Boya. So he also has a very he's a passionate young man as well. So he has a very rich profile, but let's not go into profile. So thank you so much, and over to you. I don't know if you can you share your screen already?
Okay, before I share my screen, I just have one or two things before I do that. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Harrison. And thank you so much, Engineer Tokam, for the wonderful presentation. I'm just going to do a quick presentation because of time, so that we can give rooms for question and answers. All right, before I proceed, it's very, very pertinent for us to understand what this pollution is all about. When we are talking about air pollution, we are talking about the addition of contaminants in the atmosphere that have great impact on the living organisms on Earth, human inclusive. So when we are looking at that, we are looking at the major sources of this pollution. We'll be looking at both anthropogenic, and then we are going to look at the natural sources. So when we are looking at anthropogenic, when I talk of anthropogenic, I'm simply talking about the human activities. Some of the activities that we do, we have the combustion processes, we have the chemical processes, we have nuclear atomic processes, we have roasting, we have farming, and we have mining. These are some of the activities that we carry out, which have great impact on our health. And also, we also have secondary pollutants, which is the mixture of some gases, some nitrogenous gases, and particulate matters, which have great impact also on our health. So with that, I'm going to be showing you guys what we have here, what I have with me here.
What I have with me here is an air quality index machine. It measures the indoor and outdoor air pollution. And when you look at this particular machine, I don't know if it's very clear for everyone to see. If you look here, you see a certain person with face mask. I don't know. And then you will also see the concentration of carbon dioxide. So it tells us that the amount of carbon dioxide, sulfur compounds, nitrogen oxides, particulate matters, and biological particles that we have, particularly in this atmosphere, in this environment, is not good. And that is why you see we have here 167, and it tells us that it is actually an unhealthy environment. So it is something which calls for concern. I just said that let me bring this point out so we should understand when we are talking about air quality, monitoring indoor and outdoor air quality. This is the equipment we use to measure indoor and outdoor air quality. Okay, I would like to share my screen.
Okay, can you share the screen now?
I don't know, it seems as if I'm encountering some problems.
Or you can just send to me, I can share. Since it's like when I made Tokam the host, it's like the recording stopped.
Okay.
I'm not sure why I cannot make you the co-host so that you share. But just try sharing, let's see.
Okay. I think we have that issue. We'll just proceed. I really have some maps I really wanted to talk more about. Don't know how we are going to do it, but we just have to just proceed with it.
Okay, we are going to look at the effect of air pollution on living organisms, and we are going to look at the effect of air pollution on non-living organisms. And we have, there is a map which I would really love to share. In that map, it shows the various continents of the world, and it shows the amount of carbon dioxide being emitted. And if you look at that particular map, you see
okay,
countries.
Excuse Joseph, it's like, can you share the screen? If I make you the host, will you be able to share the screen? Can you share now? Okay, so let me just see.
To the atmosphere, and this carbon dioxide which is being released to the atmosphere is as a result of our activities that we do carry out at home. We have the combustion activities, like if you see a practical situation we have presently in Cameroon, Boya predominantly, you will discover that because of the issue of improper waste management, we don't have the right system in place where our resources can be transformed to more other valuable products because of the linear circulation. Because of the linear circulation we have, we find it very, very difficult for us to remove all the valuable materials from our waste. And this leads to the emission of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and particulate matters to the environment. All right, we have the carbon dioxide emission from land use and industrial processes. So if you look on this particular map, you will see a continent like we have North and Central America. You have the Europe, you have the Oceania. You discover these are countries that emit the highest amount of carbon dioxide. And this is due to their high rate of industrialization as compared to Africa and South America. What are the burdens of air pollution on health? Globally, we know that we have about 2.4 billion people who are using our normal fireside in our context, because in our context, we have the local population. Everybody's making use of the fireside. Everybody is depending on the wood. And it's really a very big problem when it comes to health. We have people depending on kerosene. We have people depending on biomass. We have people depending on coal. And taking into consideration that we have our Africa continent where we have the population and the number of people staying in a house are many. Preparing meals with gas and electric cookers is very, very expensive. It's very, very expensive. So in such a context, in such a home where we have many people there, probably they'll prefer using fireside to prepare meals. And so we are saying that if they are to use fireside to prepare meals, then they should look at more sustainable methods, which they should look at other means in which they can use the fireside in such a way that it should be sustainable. We have the Clean Cook Stove. The Clean Cook Stove is a project that of recent we just launched. This Clean Cook Stove we shared to some communities in Boya. It's made up of mud. It uses just about 1 or 2 wood to prepare food, and it's very, very fast and very, very efficient. And the idea of this project is to reduce the rate at which we have the harvesting of wood in our forest. Also, we have the indoor pollution. We say the indoor pollution was responsible for an estimate of 3.2 million deaths in 2020. And this is the main reason why we have to channel our efforts. We have to channel everything, our resources, to see how we can combat indoor pollution. Of recent, we had a scenario where a family slept and never woke up in the morning. And what happened was that because it was cold, they took coal, they burned coal, hoping to heat their home. But what happened was that because of they didn't have the right knowledge, that coal produced a lot of carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide concentration overtook the amount of oxygen which was present in their room, and this led to their death. Also, we also have the combined effect of the ambient air pollution and the indoor air pollution, which is associated. We have about 6.7 million premature deaths. Not to talk about the diseases which are linked to air pollution, such as strokes, heart diseases, chronic pulmonary diseases, and lung cancers. Now, if you look at the impact of air pollution on health, we have both short-term effect and we have both long-term effect. And when we are talking about the short-term effect, we are looking at cough, we are looking at wheezing, we are looking at short breath. These are all the short-term effect of air pollution. And when we are talking about the long-term effect of air pollution, we are talking about stroke, we are talking about lung cancer, we are talking about respiratory conditions and cardiovascular diseases. So these are the challenges that we do face in our context. Now, when we look at this, we discover that it has a longitudinal effect. When I say a longitudinal effect, that means that it starts from the stage of pregnancy, from conception. It affects pregnant women, it affects children, it affects adults, and it affects the elderly. So we have the bioaccumulation of these pollutants. When these pollutants begin to bioaccumulate in our system, it begins to cause different health challenges in us. And this is a reason why we experience a lot of diabetes, a lot of lung cancers, and all these diseases present in our generation. But when we want to compare the statistics with the statistics before, we discover that the rate at which we have lung cancers, diabetes, and heart attack, it has drastically increased. So if you look at this particular chart, which I have before me, you see that it affects the birth weight of children. That means that if a woman finds herself in an environment where the air itself is not of good quality, what happens is that it can affect the child the woman might give birth to a child, but the child might come out with a lesser weight or with 1 or 2 challenges. And then also, we also have health challenges when it comes to children. And some of these challenges, which is very common amongst children, is coughing. We know we are actually in a season of dry, we're actually in the dry season where we have dust everywhere. And this particular challenge is what we see even in our surrounding. And then when it comes to the adults, we have stroke, we have lung cancer, and all this is as a result of bioaccumulation of these pollutants in our system. Now, if you look before me, who are the vulnerable people in this? When it comes to air pollution, we have the elderly people. The elderly people, we have 65 and above. These are the people who are more challenged when it comes to air pollution, because we all understand that as we grow older, the rate at which our cells grow is slower at the rate at which our cells deplete. And when this happens, that means that our immune system is not strong enough to combat some of these impacts, some of these challenges. And in that way, we are going to have a lot of health challenges. And also with the next set of people, we have pregnant women, we have children, and those with cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases. These are the people who are more challenged to be affected by air pollution. Now, in our case of Cameroon, we see that the air pollution is the 5th leading risk factor in Cameroon in 2017, after risk factors such as malnutrition, high blood, and unsafe sex. So it is something which is gradually increasing, which we have to all put our heads together to see how we can solve this issue. And one way that we can solve this issue is that we have to look at the Stockholm Declaration. The Stockholm Declaration, which was held in Sweden. The Stockholm Declaration, which was held in Sweden, and the Stockholm Declaration states that when it comes to global challenges like this, then we have to make use of the environmental education program. So we have to make use of the environmental education program when it comes to global issues affecting the world. And when we are talking about looking at these global environmental programs, then we are looking at factors such as awareness, which my brother rightly made mention about. We are looking at creating awareness. We are looking about bringing participation. We are looking about creating knowledge. We are looking about building skills, because when these skills are not there, no matter what we do, we can never and ever achieve our objectives. All right, let's just take a simple example to say that, okay, what are some of the skills we can provide? We can provide skills such as empowering youth, empowering the young generation, the younger people. We can go into the classroom, we can bring out this knowledge, we can bring out this knowledge in primary schools, secondary school, empower these children with the right mindset. With this right mindset, they will be able to know that, okay, I'm not supposed to burn my dirt, I'm not supposed to burn my garbage, I'm not supposed to litter my garbage. There is a particular way in which I have to dump my garbage. And in that way, we are going to have a sustainable development. Another thing again is that is to consider separately household pollutants outdoor are ranked. Consider separately household air pollutants and outdoors are ranked as the 12th and the 3rd leading risk factors. Yeah, this point here is talking about that when we look at our indoor and our outdoor air quality, is simply saying that the quality in our house, the air quality in our house, combined with that of the ambient environment, it's the 12 to the 13 leading factors, which cause a lot of death and health challenges to our society. And then we have the entire Cameroon population live in areas with 2.5 particulate matter concentration above the World Health Organization air quality guiding for health. So you discover that we are already living above even the standard which was even given. So we see that it's already a very big problem that we need to address. And if we do not do something about this, then we are saying that we are going to find ourselves in a position where we are going to have a lot of devastating effects. In 2017, we had 6,430 deaths attributed to air quality. And then exposure to outdoor particulate matters of 2.5 accounted for a loss of nearly 1 year and 6 months life expectancy. And exposure to have accounted for a loss nearly about 1 year and 4 months. So when you look at the statistics which we have before us, we see that it is actually something that affects especially the middle adulthood and the infants, not to talk about the adolescents, not to talk about the elderly and the old age. So it's actually something that we must put our efforts, we must put our mind, and we must challenge everything, we must put everything in place to see how we can all combat air pollution. And then we have almost about 65% of the population uses solid fuel. How do we do this? Everybody depends on solid fuel. So we are looking at a scenario where we have to transition to a circular economy. But how do we transition to a circular economy is an issue, given the fact that we do not have the right equipment, we do not have the right mechanism in place. So it's actually a point of concern that we have to look at it. And then if we look at the percentage of death costs attributed to air pollution in Cameroon, it's very, very clear in front of you. You can see we have about 44%, we have 20% of diabetes, we have 23% of ischemic heart disease of death, we have 35% of lung cancer, we have 60% of stroke death. So you discover that the rate at which people die of air pollution is something which we must talk about it. It's something which we must talk about it, because it's actually something that if we do not talk about it, our health, our society, and our health, which we are looking at to preserve, is going to be destroyed. And then we have control intervention. What are the control interventions that we are talking about here? One of the control interventions we have here, we have urban planning. Urban planning is one thing that we need to do. All our houses that we are planning, we need to have a particular way of planning our houses. But if you go into communities and villages, because of the fact that everybody wants to make money, especially in Moliko right now, it's called every piece of land that we have, we just look for maybe some money to see how we can build our house there, build houses irrespective of the challenges that we might encounter. But because of affluence, everybody wants to make money and everybody wants to get rich, we tend to build a lot of houses, which is not even in accordance to the urban planning. And then also we have the transport sector, which I'm not going to talk about, which my brother has already spoken a lot about it. And then we also have the industrial sector. The industrial sector too is another aspect too, when it comes to the emission of gases. And then we have waste management. Waste management, I really emphasize on waste management because it really applies in our context, Cameroon, precisely Buea. Because if you come to Buea, Moliko especially, you discover that you find waste everywhere. And I'm presently doing a research on this, and it's showing me that air pollution has an impact to the way at which students even learn. That means it has an impact to intelligence. So if our surrounding is not clean, if our surrounding is polluted, it's going to cause dizziness, it's going to cause tiredness. And that's the main reason why at one point in time, you see students saying that I'm already tired. Just about 2 hours of lectures, a student says it's already tired and can no more function because of this particular issue. And then we also have local and regional authorities. They too also have a part to play. What are the rules? What are the laws they are put in place? The laws are there, but how are they looking? How are they pushing forward these laws? Just of recent, I think I left the house. I was going to Moliko. I saw one car heavily polluting the atmosphere. I have the video with me. Maybe because of time, I cannot share that. But what are they really doing? What are they really doing? What are they really doing? So they have to make sure not only putting the laws, but to enforce the laws so that all those who define the laws are held accountable. And then we also have the health ministry. The health ministry too are there to make sure that all these challenges are being addressed. Make sure the right equipments, the right hospitals, the right technicians, the right doctors are there to address all these issues. Conclusion and recommendation. What are we talking about here? We have to conserve our energy. We must conserve our energy because we all need a clean air and a blue sky. So we must conserve the energy in a step way towards a better future with clean air to breathe. And then we must understand the concept and the assimilation and assimilate the habit to reduce and recycle some of these materials. Like I was already explaining, I said this is the challenge that we are actually facing, because in our context, Cameroon, we see that we are actually at the linear waste instead of circular economy. So whatever we produce just ends up directly at the landfills, which is a major problem to our health. We should look at means in which some of these stuff that we produce can be recycled, after recycling, treated before we can now dump to our landfills. And with this, we are going to reduce the amount of gases which are being emitted to the environment. And when these gases are being reduced, we are going to have a better and a sustainable city. And then we also have the use of public transport where whenever it's feasible. This is another very important point, like it was rightly spoken, that if we are using vehicles, then the vehicle should be a necessity. It should not just be because vehicles now shows that I am comfortable. Vehicles now show that I am good, I am healthy, I am wealthy. No, our mindset about vehicles should be transformed. Like it was trying to talk about it, and I add more points to that. Many people say, I don't like traveling with buses, I don't like traveling with trains, but that is what we actually need right now, because when we are talking about moving shorter distances, then we have to look at means in which we can all use one car to carry many people. Because if everybody has to make use of his or own car, then we are going to say that the amount of pollutants which are going to be emitted in the atmosphere is going to be high. But if many people have to make use of one particular transportation source, we discover that the amount of vehicles that are going to be emitting these pollutants are going to reduce. And in this way, we are going to have a cleaner and a more better environment. And then we are also seeing that the air quality monitoring system should be set up in Cameroon urban centers. This instrument I just showed you, we have to set it up. We have to set it up so we know the areas which are heavily polluted. And when we know the areas which are heavily polluted, then we can now know strategies we can put to address that particular areas. And then we have our environmental policies should be strengthened through government officials. So all the strategies, the laws, and everything, though they are there, they have to be strengthened to see that our environment is safe and our air is clean and good. All right, we have one take-home message. Everyone has the right to an environment that is not harmful to health or well-being, and to have that environment protected for the benefit of the present and the future generation. This was said by Nelson Mandela. Thank you so much for your keen attention.
Thank you so much, Franklin. That was actually a very great presentation, and I didn't want to talk anything about air pollution. That's my own area, but you have really done so much, and I think we are running out of time, and so we'll just go like a couple of questions or maybe contribution from the participant. But air pollution seriously is a serious issue in Cameroon, and the first thing that I want to say is that there's no national air quality management plan or system in Cameroon. So the UN Environment Program is trying to work now with the Ministry of Environment to set up something. And when it comes to air quality, to reducing air pollution, if we cannot measure it, we cannot improve it. So we need to be able to measure air quality to know that we are supposed to improve. For example, in Douala, like this, Franklin mentioned in statistics by World Health Organization, 99% of the population of Cameroon is breathing polluted air. Literally, all of us are breathing polluted air quality that is above particulate matter 10, particulate matter 2.5, and sulfur dioxide, ozone. So it's a serious issue. It's a serious issue. And sometimes it's unfortunate that most university research, they don't get to explore the health impacts of air pollution on people to really bring the statistics to limelight. It's still very low. And the research that Franklin is doing is interesting. So this is one reason we started the Clean Air Initiative Cameroon. And it's important because awareness, like someone just mentioned, awareness is not only about going to classroom. So as part of this, we need to empower people with the data, with the information that they need to know about air quality. For example, if you're staying in Douala, in Bonaberi, there are a lot of industries there. You have no idea if the air is polluted or not. But if people can measure that air quality and they know that it's polluted, they can call for action. All these things that we are doing, this training, this empowerment, this awareness, is to take action. And sometimes we might not be able to take action. It can influence policies. So it's so important. And in the coming weeks, in the coming months, Clean Air Initiative Cameroon will be adding some initiative that we hope that will change some of the situation. He said something about air quality monitoring. We are working with an organization in the US. We're trying to set up, like, get some air quality monitoring stations that are adapted to Cameroon and see how we can set it up in some areas in Cameroon and people can get real-time information. So these are some of the issues that we can bring to the limelight. And it's important that we start this conversation from somewhere. And of course, you guys see that the transportation presentation was really dense and it had a lot of insights. So we'll continue some of these things and hopefully through this webinar, through this series, we will be able to do a lot. We'll be able to change some things in our community, in our society. So it's important. Like before we maybe go to questions, like someone said, so as part of this Clean Air Initiative Cameroon, we are planning a couple of a physical workshop in Yaoundé, either Yaoundé or Douala sometime in March. And then there's another component of the workshop that of the project that will happen from between, I think from April right up to November. So it's important. It's a long-term thing. We are thinking long-term. How do we change some of these things? And we know you are all involved with organizations. You are all involved with climate work. So when you want to to we want to collaborate with all of you. People are joining from Yaoundé, people are joining from Douala, from Boya, and the air quality is bad everywhere. It's just that Yaoundé and Douala is worse. So yeah, I will just open the question. Anyone has a question, I mean, open the floor. If anyone has a question for Franklin, you can just go ahead and ask the question, and of course it's available to answer. Like I said, I don't want to say anything about air pollution. I didn't want to say because that's my field. I'm doing predictive analytics, modeling, air quality forecasting as a research project. So one of these webinars will be able to talk about some of the research that I'm doing and how people can use predictive modeling and maybe forecasting tools that they can use to monitor air quality. Because when it comes to monitoring, data is very important, historic data and all that. We don't have that in Cameroon. So that's just one thing I wanted to say. And yeah, the floor is open now. So if you have any question for Franklin, you can go ahead and ask any contribution you want to say. It's open now. I think we have just like about 5 to 10 minutes to end this call so that people can prepare towards the march. Okay, so I'm not seeing any question. I don't know. All right, let me see the chart. Okay, Franklin, there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you can check the chat, but I can just read it out to you. They say that air quality machine, the air quality machine you mentioned, how can I get one? Is the government ready to sponsor and promote that, please? What do you say?
All right, okay. Thank you for that question. This air quality machine I have here with me was given to us by our partner in Switzerland. I don't really know if the government can provide, but the government can as well undertake the project to provide it in certain towns which have a great issue with air quality. But as an individual, if you need it, then I have 1 or 2 people I can contact and make sure you have your equipment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, don't maybe the government might not be able. The government might not be able, but there's always a try. So yeah, Adamu has a question. Adamu, go ahead. I think Adamu left the call. Maybe network. All right. Adamu. Okay, there's another question in the chat. Marilyn says, with that air quality machine, if I monitor the air quality and it is high, what can I do about it considering that I have to go out?
All right, thank you so much, Marilyn, for that wonderful question. It's actually a good question. And that's the reason why we have this program for empowerment for us to know. One of the things that you can do is that you can, at our local level, since we have issue with equipment, you can make use of face mask. I think face mask is something which is very, very common. At least is something which is firsthand that can guide you, that can help you until you get to an area which is good. And then we are also seeing that if you discover that the air in that area is not good, we are advocating that you plant more trees, because trees have a very, very important role when it comes to the absorption of greenhouse gases. And they also have a very, very important role when it comes to microclimate regulation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And of course, you can wear a face mask, or maybe, because I'm giving an example related to China. In China, there are cities where the air quality is so bad. So, of course, the government is an elaborate air quality system in China. So there's an app already. So if you want to go out to you want to visit a particular area, and you check the air quality, if it is so bad, they'll advise you not to go out if you don't have an air quality mask. And also, there are ways the app will give you alternative route that you can take to avoid that air, that bad air. So that's another thing. And I'm also saying that when we understand the state of air in a particular place, for example, in Cape Town, when the air of a particular area is so terrible and people know about it, they can ask the government what is happening. They can identify the source of the pollutant. Like maybe there's an industry there. If there's an area where sulfur dioxide is always high, it means that there's a source of sulfur dioxide in that area. You can tailor your advocacy now around that thing. Maybe there's an industry that is using fuel that contains a lot of sulfur dioxide. And there is a national policy in South Africa that fuel has to have a certain level of sulfur dioxide. to reduce the amount of sulfur dioxide in a certain amount of sulfur. That is to reduce the amount of sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere. So if a company goes against that rule, if you see the air quality now, you can tell the government and they come after the company. So that's a way of getting people to take action, to even inform the government. So I think those are some of practical things. All right, Adamu is back. Adamu, maybe you can just ask your question. We have like 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you once again. I'm just trying to ask this question about the machine we just saw from our presenter. I'm asking this question because I was out for a internship with the Razel, and I was unable to take some information on the field at the level of the career where they extract stones from different dimensions in order to use for tar roads and all the like. So I was unable to take certain information on the ground because the machine we were using was the machine we needed was not they were not having it, saying that it was too expensive. So I'm trying to see with this machine that was presented to us, to what extent or what type of the information are we able to acquire with the use of that machine? What is the scale of the use, the scale at which we can use this machine to? Let's say the information we can acquire from the machine. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that question once more. With this machine tells you of the different pollutants that are found in that environment. And then it also tells you of the concentration of carbon dioxide present in that environment. Now, a combination of all these pollutants in a particular environment is going to tell you of the air quality in that particular place. Let me just go a little bit into details of the machine. We have when the machine reads between 0 to 50, it tells you that the air quality in that place is very, very good. And when it goes from 51 to 100, it tells you the quality in that place is moderate. And then when it gets from 101 to 150, it tells you that the air in that place is unhealthy for a sensitive group of people. That means that if you have elderly people around that area, or if you have pregnant women along that area, or if you have children along that area, then you should consider the fact of removing them from that place to take them to another area. And then we also have from 151 to 200, which says that the air in that place is unhealthy and is not good for breathing. And then we have from 201 to 300, which says the air in that place is very unhealthy. And it tells you that you should avoid such an environment. And then we have from 301 and above, it tells you of hazardous, and hazardous tells you of dangerous. So this is the information that it provides to you and the community.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Franklin. And you see that there's a whole lot to learn. Even using the equipment is also another skill. So hopefully we'll get to learn more of these things. And of course, if we have a physical workshop, we make sure that some of this instrument is there, and so that people can see it. We even test around. So thank you so much, Franklin. Thank you, everyone. I know it's almost past time. It was supposed to be 6:30. This is 6:41. So I think that it was a great discussion. It was a great webinar. And you all see that there are a lot of things that we need to learn around the sustainable mobility. The transport sector contributes to air pollution. So you cannot separate the two. If we want to focus on the industrial sector, we can focus. We want to focus on the waste sector. So everything is linked. So hopefully we'll get more of this webinar, cover more topics. And like I said, the Clean Air Initiative have a lot of aspects that are coming up, and we will keep all of you updated with this. And you'll definitely be seeing Mr. Franklin again, and more so, and maybe other speakers that will come in. So a lot of other speakers, a lot of people who are expert in transport And a lot of people are expert in air quality monitoring, air quality forecasting, and all that. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll share the slides. Mr. Franklin, I think you share your slide with me so that we can send through email. I'll get that for TOCAM, and I saw the emails, and then we'll share through email to all of you. And there are a whole lot of things. We thank all the partners who are supporting this initiative. And especially, I would like to mention RAPE. They are doing really good work. And so these things, we need to work together. And we need to try to look at our local realities and address our local realities around climate change. So thank you so much, everyone. And of course, the recording will also be available. And for anyone who wants to look through again and get one or two things. So definitely share when it's available. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll keep in touch. So follow ISEC on Facebook, on social media. A lot of opportunities are coming. We have a workshop on environmental education and civic engagement sometime in February, 17th February in Douala. That should be at Waya Palace Hotel in Douala. So we are talking about civic engagement is also important when it comes to climate action. So a lot of things are coming, and we are partnering with a lot of groups. We want to bring these groups together that we can work together. So thank you so much, everyone. And I hope Cameroon wins the match. And I'm presently in Abuja. So if Cameroon win, I don't know what will happen, but Cameroon should win. So thank you so much, everyone. And we'll keep in touch. If there's no other thing, so you can follow our Facebook page and any other thing. So we'll keep in touch. Bye. Okay.